Hey everyone, my name is Jake. I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, and before I get into the rebuttal from my rebuddies, I just want to go through and quickly thank the president and his entire administration and go through each and every one of them one by one for minutes on end, talk about how much I love them and think they do a great job and how much they deserve to be there.
Have you thought about the way that, like Jesus Christ, they have humbled themselves and done so many things over the years because they want to help? Take, first of all, Brother Samuel Hurd.
Mommy, when I get out, call me Sammy.
A couple weeks ago on the ex-Jehovah's Witness subreddit, a user named Elder Undercover posted this video. It's a recording of a real-life Jehovah's Witness convention, and a branch representative is speaking there.
Jehovah, Jesus, and the G-Bay have set a wonderful example.
Jehovah's Witnesses have this hierarchical structure. A branch is generally the highest level in a country or a territory. So this is a big higher up in the organization giving this talk to little pleb Jehovah's Witnesses. Usually these sorts of talks are very boring, and this is boring, but it is boring in the interesting way that I like to talk about on this channel. So this gentleman here is quite a prominent member of Jehovah's Witnesses. They fly this guy around the world to give talks, and as part of his talk that he's giving to a convention arena full of thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses, what he does for 7 minutes is talk about how each and every one of the governing body members is absolutely amazing and chosen by Jesus Christ.
Take, first of all, Brother Samuel Hurd, Jeffrey Jackson, Brother Stephen Lett, Garrett Losh, Mark Sanderson, almost a Canadian,
Kenneth Cook, he came to Bethel in 1984, Jeffrey Winder, Gage Flegel in Bethel in the bindery, and now the two brothers, Jody Jedele, and then finally Brother Jacob Roth.
I've never seen the like in all my days. One of the key teachings when you're a Jehovah's Witness is that you do not worship men, you worship God. Probably all Christians would say that, but it's always a lie, because Jesus and God don't tend to show up and have long conversations with people or do podcast interviews. You know, God, he could have a YouTube channel. No, God has to rely on a bunch of humans as intermediaries. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the intermediaries are the governing body. They're the ones who Jesus Christ has appointed. Jehovah chose Jesus to look over the congregation, and Jesus chose the governing body to do that. I don't know why Jehovah set it up this way. Like, what's he so busy doing that he can't be the head of the congregation? I don't know. But apparently the way it's supposed to work is that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, they kind of go up the chain to Jesus, and then Jesus takes it up the chain to Jehovah, and the information kind of trickles back down from there. The governing body are definitely making themselves far more prominent than they used to be. But this is kind of another level. Usually this kind of fappery occurs on JW Broadcasting or on some of the talks that they give on the official website. Headquarters people, usually the Jehovah's Witness governing body members themselves or their direct helpers. They're the ones who are giving these talks about how amazing the governing body is. But usually they talk about the governing body as a collective because Jehovah's Witnesses believe, because the governing body told them to believe it, that the governing body are fulfilling this Bible prophecy, which isn't actually a Bible prophecy, and Jehovah's Witnesses are the only people who thinks it is a Bible prophecy. The governing body, as a unit, are supposed to represent the faithful and discreet slave from the Bible. But what they don't normally do is have some lower-level flunky go out there and give a talk where they praise each and every one of the governing body members as individuals and compares them to Bible characters.
When we look through these brothers, don't we see that they really did give of themselves, just like Jesus Christ, in taking on menial work to provide the direction that we need for our organization?
This is a big step in terms of narcissistic worship of the governing body, and the poster on Reddit had a really good point. The way Elder Undercover on the XJW subreddit sees it, there's two possibilities. A, the branch committee member went way off script and decided on his own to name 11 individual men and heap unwanted praise upon them. If that was true, it speaks to the place the org is currently in. There is so much attention and adoration given to this group that even a branch committee member can get swept up into it. B, the governing body is directing branch representatives to name each of them in their visits and talk about how humble they are. I have much to say about these two possibilities. Whenever you're seeing a Jehovah's Witness talk, what you're seeing is a Jehovah's Witness speaker delivering remarks from an outline. And that outline is something that has been prepared by a branch committee of Jehovah's Witnesses. The writing department puts together these outlines. They literally tell the witness speaker which verses to use in the Bible. Like, definitely read this scripture, maybe read this one. It gives them all the bullet points. It might even say at the top, like, this is the tone of the talk, which means that this gentleman, the unnamed bootleg speaker guy who we are putting on trial today, there are one of two possibilities. One, he had an outline that specifically told him to mention each and every one of the governing body members. And that, to me, seems pretty probable because this is 7 straight minutes of his talk. They are very rigid on these talks on how long each section of an individual sermon is supposed to be. So one possibility is that the governing body is now forcing people to give talks in which they have to praise individual members of the governing body. The other possibility is this is a circuit overseer, and circuit overseers generally get to do one outline just for themselves. I don't know, it's like a weird little perk that you get. Usually, in addition to whatever mandatory talks they have to give that Watchtower has assigned to them, they get one freebie, one topic that they get to develop just for themselves. And so the other possibility is that this guy is just such a suck-up to the corporate overlords that he dedicated the one tiny bit of personal freedom he gets as a Jehovah's Witness, which is to write this one talk, and he dedicated it to glazing the governing body.
Take, first of all, Brother Samuel Hurd.
Mommy?
He spent 32 years as a traveling overseer, most of that in the deep south facing segregation. And all the difficulties that he mentioned, I remember he was saying that even to find a bathroom that he could use back then, because he was black, was absolutely a problem for him. Mark Sanderson, almost a Canadian, special pioneer in Newfoundland, which he really loved, a sub-traveling overseer, HID in Canada, and then we met him when he was going through branch school. David Splain, he really is Canadian. Missionary in Senegal, 19 years a traveling overseer in Quebec, when that was a really difficult time. It was a marvelous record.
I find this depressing. I don't even really know what to make about all that. Maybe we can just let it speak for itself, because what I like to do on this channel is kind of stealth people in with something substantial and then mostly talk about weird personal nitpicks that I had when I was a Jehovah's Witness that don't really matter, but they do. And this one has to do with 9/11.
Why is it necessary to be so picky, to be so fussy?
Welcome to the Nitpick Corner, now filmed in an actual corner with worse audio because I don't have a microphone here yet. So this weird thing got passed around a lot when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Like, I would hear this story. It was a thing you would hear people say in regards to how amazing the witnesses are, that after 9/11, we were the only religion that was allowed to be on or near ground zero because we're just that godly and trustworthy and our reputation is that amazing.
Brother Stephen Lett, he was a Bethelite, special pioneer, and 19 years as a traveling overseer, and he was one of the traveling overseers who was sent down into the disaster scene of 9/11 to provide encouragement for the people after that. We know at that time the people in charge said that Jehovah's Witnesses were the only ministers allowed to come to 9/11 because they were the only ones who gave real hope to the people.
This never seemed right, even when I was a witness. I obviously never wanted to double check, because what would the upside be? I find out that my religion is wrong, but now that I'm out and have nothing left to lose, I did go ahead and just fact check them on that, and yeah, it's a huge and obvious lie. The best part is that if you do the Google search in the AI overview thing, which I know is not necessarily the most trustworthy source, it mentions basically every religion other than Jehovah's Witnesses. But the craziest thing is that there's one religion that also does this exact same tactic as Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a religion that uses a lot of the same tactics as Jehovah's Witnesses, and they actually came after them. They're called Scientology. Scientology does the same thing. They also like to mention that they're so special because they were allowed on Ground Zero after 9/11. Probably there were some witnesses there, but obviously they were not the only religion allowed there, especially considering that there is just famously a church that was right near Ground Zero that didn't get impacted, that was very important to recovery after 9/11 and accommodating a lot of different religions in their church. The thing is, I cannot actually find any evidence that any Jehovah's Witnesses were there at all, whereas I can find evidence for Scientology being there. I feel pretty confident that there were at least some Jehovah's Witnesses who were allowed there, who, like other religions, were just there helping out, doing whatever they could, and probably because they're witnesses, also passing out some Watchtower literature for sure. But I can absolutely find an article that is specifically about Scientology's presence on Ground Zero from the New York Times, and they would know, right? I felt like super sure that there were some Jehovah's Witnesses that must have been there, and that like there would be some article written about it, and maybe there is. And if you can find that, please do send it to me. My email's in the description. But I just added Jehovah's Witnesses to my search terms, and if you do that, if you search some variation of religions that were allowed on Ground Zero after 9/11, or religions who volunteered after 9/11, you won't get anything. If you add Jehovah's Witnesses after your search terms, the first result is jw.org or Watchtower Online Library. Okay, future Jake editing myself in here. When I went to actually record this, I'm doing it on a different computer now, and the first result is different. The top result is now this thing called the Longview News Journal, and so at first I was like, oh, okay, good, I finally found proof of it. But this was written in September 2021, September 11th, 2021, and it's a story just told from the perspective of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just telling a Jehovah's Witnesses story about how they were there. So, unfortunately, I still haven't found anything in writing in any non-Watchtower sources that can prove that they were there. I swear to God, it probably isn't that hard to do, but I'm talking about something from the time, not now, not written after the fact, now that this narrative has seeped in. So, I don't know, guys. It's almost turning into the conspiracy corner.
Welcome, Internet. I'm so happy to share with you this conspiracy theory.
I said almost. I don't actually feel like moving into a different corner right now. It doesn't really matter. It's just weird, and maybe you should stop telling lies about 9/11 Watchtower. Maybe just stop that, since it's not true, and it just clearly cannot be true, and there is so much evidence to the contrary, and it makes you sound stupid, so stop it.
We know at that time, the people in charge said that Jehovah's Witnesses were the only ministers allowed to come to 9/11 because they were the only ones who gave real hope to the people.
A less important nitpick that actually I think is maybe more important to JW theology is one of the reasons why this guy tries to justify talking about the governing body as much as he does is to prove the point that, like Jesus Christ, the governing body had a similar background, but they don't. I mean, he goes through their background. It's nothing like Jesus, but here's how he frames it.
So when we look through these brothers, don't we see that they really did give of themselves, just like Jesus Christ, in taking on menial work to provide the direction that we need for our organization?
No, that is not why Jesus was famous. Jesus was not noteworthy because he did menial labor. Jesus was famous because he was able to perform miracles that allowed him to gain a following, because he was the greatest teacher of all time, and he could do and say all these amazing things, and he was humble, he was homeless, he dedicated his life to helping poor and marginalized and outcasts from society, like the poor and lepers and women. Not that he did some carpentry in his younger years and occasionally went fishing with his friends. Thus ends the nitpick corner. I just realized I forgot to say what he said about each of the governing body members. For the most part, it's just recaps of basic information that has been published in the Watchtower. Governing body members at some point usually get to write their life story, just a simple little autobiography about how they became a witness and rose through the ranks of the organization. So most of the time our English friend is just recapping Wikipedia, but he also seems to know some of these guys personally, since he is also a Bethel higher-up, and he occasionally sprinkles in knowledge that, as far as I know, has not been previously released. For example, that Kenneth Cook was a hairdresser in Bethel.
Kenneth Cook, he came to Bethel in 1984. He was on the press for 4 years. Then he was a hairdresser. I don't know the connection there. Then he was in the Bethel office.
This information was not in Kenneth Cook's life story, so I think we're meant to be impressed that he has some secret inside knowledge. I don't know if I'm impressed, but I am thankful to have the knowledge that Kenneth Cook worked in the hairdressing department. That's just fun.
Hi.
But people tune into the Alt-Worldly channel for serious analysis of unserious things, and one of the things I realized when I was editing this is we can actually see mathematically and physically in very clear terms how much this guy loves each of the governing body members. I can quantify his love and respect for each one individually. I clipped all the individual segments of him talking about the governing body members, and so now we can see exactly which ones he talked about for the longest. Sanderson, the clear frontrunner. He talks so much about him, gets a big applause and laugh break. Brother Mark Sanderson is this guy's favorite governing body member, and it's not even close. His second favorite is a pretty close toss-up between Jeffrey Jackson and Stephen Lett. If you combine how much he loves Jeffrey Jackson and Stephen Lett, it's as much as he loves Mark Sanderson. So it takes those two guys to equal his love of this guy. Loesch and Sam Hurd are in a similar situation where it kind of takes two of them to equal one Stephen Lett. And the rest of these guys really are just the rest. Now, in a devastating turn of events, Jody Jadaley, who is very new, within the last couple of months appointed to the governing body, is talked about for slightly longer than Kenneth Cook, the hairdresser himself.
Hi.
It's pretty close, though. We might as well call it a tie. Gage Flegel, who has been on the governing body for much longer than Jody Jadaley and Jacob Rumpf, is talked about for so little that at this far zoomed out, you can't even see his name. I did label it, but you gotta zoom in. I gotta, zoom and enhance. Gage Flegel truly and also ran in this group. Gage Flegel is the star of one of the most incredible films Jehovah's Witnesses have ever produced. He really put on a performance for the ages. But you can fit everything this man has to say about Gage Flegel inside the pause between where he introduces Mark Sanderson and gets into his second sentence. So that's pretty devastating for Gage. I hope that more circuit overseers or branch people give talks like this so we can kind of compare and contrast and get a sense mathematically of who is the most beloved among them. That way we can keep everyone posted on the governing body member power rankings. And this guy actually is pretty hip with the lingo. He calls him the GB.
Jehovah, Jesus, and the G-Bay have set a wonderful example.
He doesn't have time for all those syllables. He's got to spend as much time as possible talking about Mark Sanderson.
That is not even funny.
That was not brought to you by artificial intelligence, just so you know.
Bye.